What's up, guys? Are you looking for some late night budget magic shenanigans? If so, you've come to the right place. All right, when we last left off, I had just concluded an incredible game with my budget nin deck where I was super behind against a green-white token deck. Managed to scrape out the win. Spoilers for that other video if you haven't seen it yet, but still worth watching even if you do know the outcome. And a couple of games later, still playing the same budget deck, which I've suddenly gotten excited about because it's a fun reminder of how sometimes you have to really just kind of coast on your innate skills and judgment and not really leaning too hard on the quality of your cards versus your opponents. Certainly when you're playing a $2 budget deck, there's essentially a guarantee that you're not going to be playing against someone who's got weaker cards than you. They may have a much less cohesive strategy, and that's usually what's going on no matter what you do if you're a spike like me. But certainly they can play with higher quality cards and more expensive cards and so on, which gives them the ability to get parity or even come out way ahead. This game, actually, the guy is playing what looks to be fairly budget, but a troublesome matchup for my deck nonetheless, and is quite a game. Not as amazing as the last one, but still absolutely worth recording, and of course, the replay cooperated. So let's get started. I'm up against Grant Havoc, and I am, as I said before, running the aforementioned budget Nin the Pain Artist deck. This is the 2DH version of it rather than my $150 version. And he is playing Ezuri, Claw of Progress, or also known as the fair version of Edric. Basically, costs more, a little bit more gimmicky, slower, much more suited to multiplayer, obviously, than Edric is. And I've got the famous Nin right here. And I'm going first this game. Really good hand, except missing red. And unfortunately, Star Compass, one of those really mediocre mana-producing artifacts that doesn't make colors unless you have the basic land type. And I do run a ton of basic mountains in this deck versus my non-budget version. So I do frequently have mountains in play to make Star Compass produce red. Right now it's just going to be making blue, which makes it just a Sky Diamond. Perfectly acceptable. All right. Very glad to have Daze in my hand just because it does give me some protection against the early Soul Ring. And sometimes even Mana Crypt when your opponent leads with that. I have dazed my fair share of Mana Crypts. Turn 1 Forest, Jiraga. Well, this isn't quite a Soul Ring, but it is effectively a Soul Ring, and I think that given the way that my hand is, I do have a Merchant Scroll, and I could potentially Merchant Scroll for Fire Ice to kill it off. Unfortunately, I don't have red, so I don't really know when red is going to show up, and I can't really deal with him having 4 mana on turn 2 when I have a relatively slow draw. And my only counterspell is a counterflux, so I'm just going to daze, even though it means I'm set back a turn. That's totally fine. I went first anyway, so it's kind of like you just got an extra card. And often when you counterspell one of these early plays anyway, you kind of can screw them because they kept a 2-land draw, and now their entire hand is bricked because you counterspelled their mana artifact. I can't tell you how many games I've won simply by casting Force of Negation or Force of Will or Spell Pierce or Daze on a early Crypt or Soul Ring, and your opponent kept an entire hand based on the strength of that single card. And yeah, they just fold instantly and often just concede to that first counterspell, which is pretty gratifying. All right, just play my island here. He's got a second forest. Ooh, Priest of Titania. All right, well, that would have been an absolutely insane turn if I hadn't dazed there. And that was pretty much probably the only opportunity to even use the daze given the way that he developed here. We would have leveled up Draga Tree Speaker, tapped it, and cast Priest of Titania. Well, I guess I would have been able to hard cast the daze at that point if he had done that, but then he'd still have 4 mana in play. And I guess I would have 2-land myself. Yeah, I probably would have played the Star Compass and had to pick up a land to daze. That would have made the most sense because he would have made that same play. All right, red. Fantastic. So I'm just going to play my Star Compass. Unfortunately, the Star Compass does not make a second red mana due to Great Furnace being not a mountain, and it only triggers off of basic land, which is pretty easy to miss, actually, when you play with the card a fair amount. All right, Chromatic Lantern. I was so relieved when he didn't have blue this turn, actually, at least not blue in the form of a blue land. I'm not really sure why he's playing Chromatic Lantern other than he just has a really dedicated mana production theme, as you'll see later on. But Chromatic Lantern seems a little out of place in a deck like this, but it may just be because he's more budgety. This card is very budget online, I think. I think it only costs a couple of tickets. I'm sorry, a fraction of a ticket. And yeah, that may be why he's not playing more blue-green dual lands. All right, did not even attack. All right, I'm just going to play my mountain. And go back to his turn. And I'm just sitting on counterflux here, expecting him to play the Ezuri and hoping that he doesn't have another land. And my plan really is to counterflux the Ezuri, and then probably go get Merchant Scroll to get Electrolyzed to burn away Priest of Titania, and that should keep Ezuri off my back for a couple turns, giving me time at least to get Nin online. Sure enough, he does not have another land. Down comes Ezuri, which is a warrior. I'm sorry, an elf, to fuel the Priest of Titania, and I'm so glad I drew that red mana source last turn to cast the Flux. I would have actually Merchant Scrolled for just plain old Counterspell if I had not drawn red there. All right. Jory N. Well, hello. That's very timely. And unfortunately, I would really, really love this turn to just play Jory N into Nin, but of course, because this doesn't make red, I only have one source of red, so I can't do that. So I'm going to do the next best thing. I'm going to tap out here and cast Merchant Scroll. So that allows me to draw a card off Jory N, which is really, really nice. And I get Izzet Charm. Wow, fantastic. That just gives me a burn spell to kill Priest of Titania next turn. All right, so let's take a look at the deck. This is the current version of the budget Nin deck. You'll see it has just a ton more red spells in it than my non-budget version. This is like upwards of 10. And you're forced to play with kind of mediocre things. I actually noticed that I'm not running Vandal Blast, and instead I have By Force. I'm not really sure what's going on with that decision. It may just be that Vandal Blast always costing 5, whereas you're just not generally playing, when you're playing budget, you're not playing against mass artifacts very often, and being able to buy force for like 3 mana to kill 2 artifacts is better than having to pay 5 to kill 2 artifacts, and it's only one mana worse to kill 1. I'm not really sure if that's correct. I don't know, maybe Vandal Blast should be in the deck instead of buy force, but either way I have buy force right now, and that doesn't even matter because I'm looking for blue instant. So the question is, what do you get here? I could get Electrolyze, which, again, was an important draw last turn, now not as impressive because I just drew the Izzet Charm. And I got to really basically assume here, he does have 5 mana in play. I kind of have to assume worst case scenario, which is that he draws another land and he plays Ezuri next turn. So based on that, in my opinion, I think my best card to get is something that deals with an Ezuri that's blue, that's an instant in an efficient way. And short of doing something silly like getting Electrolyze and Izzet Charm, which actually isn't the worst thing. Again, that doesn't work, though, because I need double red, and I did consider that. Because I could go Electrolyze one to the Priest, 1 to the Ezuri, and then finish it off with Izzet Charm, but I do not have a second red, so that's out of the question. Fact or Fiction is tempting, but I've got Nin to draw cards, and that means that I just need a tempo play, and that means I get Repulse. So that's what I'm going to get preemptively in anticipation of him playing his Ezuri. Again, when you're playing Counter Magic, and you're thinking ahead, basically, just always assume, like, what's the worst thing that your opponent could probably do on the following turn, particularly if you're tapping out to use a tutor, and just try to preempt whatever their best play might be, which, in my opinion, based on all the information I currently have, is just him casting his commander. And he doesn't have a blue, or he doesn't have another land, so instead he casts Marwyn the Nurturer. And now I'm, like, thinking, damn, I really, really, really wish I had gotten Electrolyze. And then he plays Elvish Archdruid, and then I'm really, really happy I got Repulse. It's kind of funny how that could change. All right, that puts counter on there. And yeah, this is going to be an interesting turn coming up. I'm going to try to cast 2 spells at a bare minimum. All right, Counterspell. Well, as much as I would like to just sit on the Counterspell, the problem is that he just put about 1 billion mana into play. This thing is making currently just 1, but it pumped this to 3 mana, and this is making 3. So he's got 6. He put so much mana into play that turn. He put 4 mana into play. Actually, even 5, right? 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he put 5 mana into play. That's ridiculous. So with 5 mana in creatures and me not having a sweeper and him having 4 additional mana, Ezuri is castable multiple times, which means that Counterspell is not an answer to the commander right now at all. Counterspell is an answer to the ramp cards, and it gives you some containment pressure, but it does not allow you to contain a game when your opponent's mana is running amok. And I really hate counterspelling commanders anyway, because they can just be chain cast. You know, they can be spammed when he's got tons of mana. So the way that I can constrain his commander is by killing off creatures instead that prevent him from just chain casting it. And looking at this board state here, I'm thinking, okay, well, what are the different options here? And I realized that this thing is actually not all that powerful by itself, which means that if I bounce the Archdruid with the Repulse, so I'm going to do that first. Oh, and actually, that's right. I bounced this guy. And the reason I'm bouncing this guy is because without counters on it, if he doesn't play another elf, then it doesn't actually make any mana. It's just kind of mediocre. And I can Izzet Charm away the Elvish Archdruid, which just drops him down to a single Priest of Titania, and he still is not able to. He's still not able to cast Ezuri without drawing a land, and he did not have a land last turn. So unless he draws one this turn, I should be okay. Plus, I'm going to draw an extra card off Jordan as well. And so even though I'm tapping out, I don't feel like Counterspell is a particularly good answer to the Ezuri in the long term. I need to deal with these creatures. So I'm going to bounce this guy first, and so when he replays it, it's shut off essentially, and then I can blow up the Elvish Archdruid with Izzet Charm and draw a card. So that is the play. And I get to draw a card there, and I draw Kefnet. Very tasty. Love Kefnet. This card is just like borderline, not quite good enough to go in the regular Nin deck, although I do use it in my multiplayer Nin deck, because having a perpetual, indestructible shooting outlet is so strong. But in budget, this thing is just incredibly powerful. There's so few cards that really just can interact with it or deal with it, and it can win the game single-handedly, and of course, you just get these crazy snowball runaway games where you're just shooting it every turn with Nin, with all of your lands out. And so yeah, there's the Izzet Charm. That's going to blow up Elvish Archdruid, and I draw another card. Electrolyze, right on schedule. Badass. All right. I'm going to attack with Jordan. All right. I'm going to move the mouse away so it's not too clicky. He still has not drawn an island, and he replays Marwyn, and goddamn, look how good Electrolyze is right now. And I'm thinking, please don't have an elf. Don't have an elf. Just don't have an elf. And this is such a blowout. And he has something that sure looks like it would be an elf, given that it's blue-green and it kind of makes mana, but it's a merfolk. Hell yeah, it's a merfolk. All right. And he's got nothing else to do. So weird how this keeps flickering because of the chromatic lantern. I draw a negate, not likely to be that good, but man, this is a hell of an Electrolyze. Fry both of those. I'm thinking, God, let me draw an untapped red source so I can play Nin and draw another card off Jordan and still have Counterspell. These two are toast. Unfortunately, I just draw the Highland Lake, which means... And I decide I'm not going to attack here. I mean, I don't really know how much damage pressure he's going to produce, but I win in the long game, and damage doesn't really matter too much. I think I'd rather just keep my guy untapped. All right. Just tapping some more mana over here. Eternal Witness. Weird. I've never seen this hideous artwork before. What is that thing even? Weird. All right. Yeah, it looks so bad, particularly in this new frame. But because this is basically the best card in the graveyard that I would most likely have to deal with, this is a no-brainer counterspell here. All right. I know a lot of people would actually like let him resolve the Eternal Witness so that you just counter the thing that he gets, which costs him more mana. But if I'm just going to, I'd rather him not have a free 2/1 body just for no reason. So with that in mind, I decide to just counter it right there. I think people do not counter Eternal Witness nearly often enough. It's not regrowth because it is a body too. When someone casts regrowth, you almost always just counterspell the thing that they get with it, depending on the target. But Eternal Witness is a body, so it's a different story. All right, I'm going to run out Nin. I'm going to play the Mighty Kefnet, drawing another card off Jordan. This thing has already drawn me 3 extra cards. So strong. Just, it's so fun. One thing I really, really like about Budget is you get to play with a lot of cards that are just under the bubble of strength for regular full budget commander, you know, that are basically just overshadowed. Like, for example, the 4-mana Jace that was an all-star in the last match that I did a video for is just totally overshadowed by Jace the Mind Sculptor. And Tezzeret the Seeker is just so much stronger than the 4-mana Chandra, the one that allows you to exile a top card of your library and ping stuff. And obviously Chandra Torch of Defiance is better than that too. But when you're playing Budget, you're forced to use these somewhat underpowered cards, and it's fun to actually just really see them at their full potential. All right. He's still stuck at effectively 5 mana. Okay, now he's got 6. And he plays Calney Heart Expedition. That is not a very big deal. So I don't care about that at all, despite having a negate in hand. Really just looking to stop Planeswalkers. Wirewood Channeler. Wow, okay. All right, so you're welcome to have that too. He's got only 1 elf, and he's already got plenty of blue, so that doesn't really change anything. All right, happy to draw a land here. I'm just going to attack with the Jori. And I'm actually attacking here not because I want to do damage, but there's a possibility that he won't recognize that I can make it able to block during the attack step by shooting it. And suddenly it's just an instant 5/5 blocker out of nowhere that snipes down a creature. And I've had people attack into this all the time. Not only on Magic Online, but also in live games too. They just don't recognize. They see you with 3 cards in hand, and they go, aha, I can just attack in with my 4/4 or whatever, and you just splatter it and draw 4 cards as well. So we'll see what happens here. All right, Grant, what are you up to? Tapping a bunch of mana. Wow, okay. Mana Reflection. This is like a miniature version of that Nyxbloom Ancient, which is a creature, a 5/5 that actually does 1.5 mana reflections. This is a negate target for sure, though. So actually, you'll see me start tapping mana here, and I'm actually thinking about activating Nin to shoot Kefnet to see what I draw, and to see whether or not, like if I draw a bounce spell, maybe I just let this happen, so he has to spend an entire turn recasting it. But then I realized that if I do that, he's left this untapped, so I realized that if I do that, then the jig is up, and he won't run into my Kefnet. So instead, I'm just going to negate it and pretend like I only have 2 cards in hand, and that forces him to tap out, which I don't blame him for at all. I mean, the writing's on the wall. I'm going to draw 5 at the end of his turn with my commander, and he's completely tapped out. He just had a 6 mana spell countered for 2. And he says no mas, and that is the end of the game. Not nearly as close a game as that last one. You notice I'm at 30 instead of at 2. But still, really, really fun game. Neat showcase of some of Nin's tools. This was just all about this guy. Jody and the unappreciated Ruin Diver. Really, really powerful. Is it legendary? And hope you guys enjoyed that game. I've got a way, way, way better budget Nin game coming up next in line. So stay tuned, and I'll see you over there.